Drinks, food, art, fun. This is Hops and Spirits Kentucky.
Welcome into another edition of the Hops and Spirits Kentucky podcast. We've got a great one for you this week. Our Q&A is with Jeptha Creed and talking about the distillery and how it's come along there in Shelbyville. And if you don't see a new episode from us here in the next week or two, don't panic. We'll be back in mid-February, just taking a little break at the start of the month. Then we'll be back with some really cool chats. And before we get into our Q&A this week, what's pouring around Kentucky? Some news and notes. Louisville food truck Good Belly has plans to open its first brick-and-mortar location in the Highlands this spring. The New York-style deli will occupy the former space of Silly Axe Cafe on Dundee Road. Also, the Keswick is now open in Shelby Park, and it's a throwback to 1953. Owners Ryan and Rachel Cohey transitioned their restaurant Red Top Hotdogs into a bar after closing it last September. The new loosely themed Appalachian dive bar pays homage to the historic Keswick Democratic Club that operated in the building from 1953 to 2016. And while the brick and mortar is gone, the Red Top food truck is not. You can expect it at the Keswick, and because this space has a kitchen on site, you can expect pop-ups from other restaurants around Louisville. In northern Kentucky, Ford's Garage, a 1920s themed burger and beer joint, recently opened in Florence at the former Tilted Kilt location. This will be the first Ford's Garage location in Kentucky and the second in the greater Cincinnati area after the Northwood location opened last year. And this spring, a brand new Braxton Brewing taproom will arrive at the Cincinnati Northern Kentucky Airport in Concourse A. Construction on the 1,500-foot taproom has already begun. It will feature the company's recognized bites, brews, and seasonal offerings for incoming and outgoing travelers. And mark your calendars, because Par6 Social is scheduled to open at 3565 Nicholasville Road at the Fayette Mall in Lexington on February 27th. Par6 Social is an entertainment complex featuring a restaurant, bar, large screen TVs, and 3 top golf swing suite simulators. And coming to the Distillery District is a new taco joint, which will take them former Middle Fork spot. Desperados is expected to open this spring or summer with a full menu of fresh tacos, salsas, and hundreds of mezcals and tequilas. The space is currently being updated to include an indoor-outdoor patio. But enough of our news and notes from around Kentucky. Up next is our Q&A with Autumn and Joyce Nethery from Jeptha Creed. Enjoy.
Remember to check out Hops and Spirits on social media at Hops Spirits, all one word, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also find Hops and Spirits on YouTube and at hopspirits.com.
Joining us here for our Q&A, they are pretty cool duo, and they're family members at that. They are from Jeptha Creed. Please welcome in Joyce and Autumn Nethery.
Hi.
Well, that was in sync. That was just perfect. I love I love that.
Wasn't intentional.
Joyce is the CEO, master distiller. Autumn is the director of sales and marketing. And I always like to start this off because folks might know the bigger brand, might not know who's behind the brand. Now, I don't want you to get too detailed into your answers about Jeptha Creed and all that, but just a little bit of Cliff Notes version about yourselves.
Well, I'm Joyce, and I am one of our founders. Autumn is also a founder, and I am our CEO and master distiller. We are a farm craft distillery that is family run and family operated, and we're just so excited and happy to be part of Kentucky bourbon scene.
Autumn?
Yeah.
So I'm Autumn Nethery. I'm the daughter portion of the mother-daughter duo here at Jeptha Creed. And I'm our director of sales and marketing. So as my mother likes to say, she's our master distiller. She makes the product and then I get it out the door.
It's a good team. It's a good duo. That's why I said I love what y'all are doing. And my first question is for Joyce, because when I was reading up on you, I love this. You clearly have a love of science. Anyone that understands bourbon in the bourbon world knows there's a lot of science behind it. But you went from a process engineer to a high school teacher to a distiller. That seems like quite the journey.
I have been on quite a career journey, and it's not anything that I would have ever mapped out. If back in high school, I was looking at my options and what my career needed to be. The path I've taken would not have been identified at all. But I have always loved science. Math and science were always my thing from high school on, and got my master's degree in chemical engineering, University of Louisville Speed Scientific School. Then worked as a process engineer for a company called Roman Haas, which is now part of Dow, DuPont. And did that for many years in industrial distillation, actually. And what I've found is that whether I'm distilling the product I did there, which was MMA, methyl methacrylate, or if I'm distilling ethanol for bourbon, the principles and applications and techniques are all very, very similar. But bourbon is a lot more fun. It's a lot more fun. I would never have tasted the MMA. You get to taste the bourbon. Did that for many years, left engineering to become a high school chemistry and physics teacher, and learned lots of important skills while I was doing that. Classroom management, hugely important, and applies to when you've got bachelor parties and bachelorette parties in the distillery. Same skills, same technology, same mental placements. And then I became a chief financial officer for my husband's company, and then now distillery. So all of those pieces come together, I think, beautifully to be able to run the distillery now.
Now, Autumn, you though didn't exactly have a love of bourbon, if I read correctly. It came to you maybe a little later in a trip and a year in Scotland, right?
Well, when we first talked about starting the distillery, I, at the time, was a freshman in college. I was 18, getting ready to turn 19. So wasn't really legal to drink. So when we first talked about starting a distillery, I thought it was kind of a crazy idea. And my original path through college was going to be that I was wanting to be a film major and make movies and videos and that kind of stuff. And quickly figured out that that wasn't going to be a realistic career path going forward. So I was already interested in looking at new things, and marketing was one that I was looking at. And when we started talking about a distillery, I was kind of like, I have absolutely no idea what that means. Like, what do you mean bourbon? We're going to make bourbon. What is involved in all that? Well, luckily being in Kentucky and in Shelbyville and only within 40 minutes of every major bourbon distillery in the world, who all just so happen to do tours, it was very easy to go and check things out. And it was actually at Woodford Reserve while I was on spring break. We as a family did a tour there, and we were the only ones on the tour. And the tour guide found out that I was interested in the industry, and he really took us on a behind the scenes in-depth tour, like stopped employees on the tour to talk to me about the industry. And that's where I saw that there was a beautiful mixture of just science, Kentucky, and this art form to really create bourbon. And while I couldn't legally taste it, I was able to try some of it, and it was delicious. So
We won't tell anyone.
I wanted to get into the industry. Yeah, exactly. I'm over 21 now. I can talk about it. But nobody wanted to teach you how to make bourbon when you're under 21 in America. So found a program over in Scotland through Heriot-Watt University. At the time, the idea was that I would be our master distiller one day, and went over there, lived there for about a year studying. And one of the things we quickly figured out was that I did not inherit the chemical engineering mind of my mother over there. It would go in one ear out the other. I wouldn't understand it. And one of the things that you really need when you're distilling is a good understanding of biology, chemistry, and agriculture. While I can maybe understand the ag and some of the, engineering pieces of it, the chemistry and the biology were not clicking. So master distiller was never going to be a something that I would be able to do. We quickly figured that out. So that's how Joyce ended up becoming our master distiller, and figured out that one thing that we were really missing was the marketing and the sales piece.
Hugely important.
Hugely important,
Mm-hmm.
Very important. And we didn't have that. So while I was still studying marketing, ended up switching pathways, and that was the direction that we went in.
Well, and it works out that you were able to get that knowledge of kind of what goes on, even if you're not able to produce it, because that lets you be able to talk about it and do your pitch, and both go hand in hand, because you can't have one without the other. And truthfully, you can't have any of it unless you have the distillery. So how did the distillery come to be?
Well, the distillery was actually my husband's idea. He grew up as a dairy farmer, and we had a dairy of our own for a while. We milked about 40 cows, a mixture of Holstein and Jerseys. And it reached a point where the feed bill was greater than the milk revenue. So I'm like, this has to stop. But we managed to keep the farm. We managed to keep the equipment, those pieces. And this was my husband's idea. The distillery was my husband's idea. He kept talking about it, but I didn't want him to go blind or blow himself up. So I found him some training, a 5-day distillers class at Moonshine University in Louisville, which is a real thing. Mm-hmm. And got him signed up for what just happened to be their very first class of a 5-day distillers class, but then he couldn't go. So I'd already paid for it. So I went, and through that, I fell back in love with my engineering, and I fell back in love with copper. But the most important thing that came out of that class was the concept of ground to glass. Mm-hmm. That with my husband's agricultural expertise and with still having the farm and the land, we could grow our own heirloom varietals of corn. With my engineering, we could distill it. Autumn's expertise, get it out the door, and we can make a beautiful bourbon product. So I came out of that class with that concept. So now when I tell that story, I have to say that my husband was right. This was a great idea.
It pains you to say that, though. I can tell.
Yes, it's difficult. I have to say my husband was right every time I tell a story. So, but he was right. And now we have the distillery. The family gets to work together. It's a very beautiful thing.
And I was going to say, what's it like for the family to work together? Because, sometimes family, usually when you work, you get to leave it at work. But, if you come home and are having dinner and everyone's sitting around the table, unfortunately, work might come up.
Yeah, it's kind of impossible to separate it out. I mean, good news is that we all kind of live separately now. So, my brother has his own place. I've got my own place, and my parents have their place. Sure, we're only less than 2 miles away from each other, all on the same farm still, but we at least have our own places to escape to so we can get away from each other occasionally. But no, I think part of it, I mean, growing up on a family farm, you kind of were forced to work together from the time we were kids up to now anyway. So through the process, you kind of just end up learning how to work together and still be able to kind of separate work from family to a point. I mean, sometimes there's just some things you just can't separate.
Yeah, there's always issues. I mean, and there's issues whether you're family or not. Mm-hmm. But I think what really works out well for us is that we've all learned through, having a family farm from, like Autumn said, working together from there being kids, and my husband worked with his father from childhood, that you learn to allow each person to have their own strengths, to really embrace those strengths and let them grow and develop with those, and that those strengths actually, different sets of strengths actually help build the whole business. So we kind of just learned to let everyone be in their own lane and not to cross over too much.
Well, and it works too. Like you said, you're the distiller. Autumn, you've got the sales marketing. Your husband's working the farm, so you each have an area that you can bring something to the table. And you mentioned the farm. I mean, that farm has been, the family history with there goes back generations, and that's where the distillery is built, is on that land, right?
So the distillery is actually about 10-15 minutes away from the family farm. One of that separation of family and work things, we decided that, one, at the time, Shelby County was dry, and where the family farm was in a dry area. We wouldn't be able to have a tasting room. And we really needed a tasting room. So we found a piece of property in Shelbyville, still within the county, like literally 10 minutes from our houses, that we could build the distillery on and be able to be annexed into the city of Shelbyville and allow us to have a tasting room. And it's still an agricultural piece of land. We grow the corn here, and all of the corn that we use for our products for the Bloody Butcher is grown within 10-15 miles of the distillery. At this point, we've got 1,200 acres that we grow on now. So it's
growing
all
about
within
700 acres of the corn this year.
Yeah.
And how cool is it to kind of be able to do that and have that, whether it's your land or just in the region, be able to produce something so close by and know what's going on.
It is really cool. It's cool to be able to, you actually start to notice a little bit of differences between each region, even when they're really close together. You've got some pieces where you're like, okay, this is like great fertile ground for corn. We really need to plant here. And then other places you're like, that's the sacrificial piece, because we've got up to 25% of our yield could be lost to wildlife because they just love the bloody butcher corn so much. So you find different places and you've got those different things that can come up, but it's actually really cool and fun to be able to grow our own products, basically.
Yeah.
And I was going to say too, the name, you could have gone with the family, the name, the last name, but you guys chose Jeptha Creed. Can you explain the name and what it means and how it all came to be?
Yeah, so our home farm where I grew up, where my dad grew up, even where my grandfather kind of grew up, was all at the foothills of these hills in Shelby County called Jeptha Knob. And we figured out as we were looking up, because I would spend a lot of time looking up distillation history in Shelby County. And one of the things that I ended up stumbling upon, which had absolutely nothing to do with distillation history in the county, but found where Squire Boone and Daniel Boone were exploring the area, and they named the knobs after a biblical warrior in Judges 11. And so you've got both my family history of the area, Kentucky history being in the area, the biblical component that my mom absolutely loved. And we were like, okay, well, we got to be Jeptha. And then because we grow the corn for our products, all of our flavored products are using all natural ingredients, nothing artificial, no flavorings, extracts, colorings, that kind of stuff. We chose Creed as a promise to our customers to be always upfront and honest with them about what's going into their bottle, that they will know what they're drinking. So that's where Jeptha Creed came from.
Now, were there any other names being thrown about, or was Jeptha?
There was an entire list. I think for one of our company-wide meetings, I went through our emails from, at this point now, 10 years ago. It's been 10 years since we first came up with the idea for Jeptha Creed. And it was quite literally a 10-page sheet of just names. And we had places where we'd X'd out and things that we liked. Like I had one that a lot of people will say Jeptha Creek. And we specifically wanted not to use Creek, even though Jeptha Creek does run through the home farm, because we didn't want to get confused with Knob Creek. So there was an entire page that just had names using the word Creek that we threw out. So yeah, believe me, there were a lot of different names that we went with.
Actually, I think coming up with the name was one of the most difficult things about starting a distillery. It was like, and it became a generational thing too, that my husband and I really liked the Jeptha Creed. The kids didn't at first and didn't understand it. And that we had almost battles over the name for a while.
Yeah, what is it? We finally settled on Jeptha Creed. Like we started the process of trying to pick a name in 2013, and we finally settled on one almost in 2015.
Yeah.
Like we didn't even have a logo or name when we first started having press releases going about a distillery starting in Shelby County from a local family. Like we didn't have a name picked out yet, but we were making headlines because we were trying to get laws and zoning and stuff changed around here to allow a distillery. So it was nearly 2 years of fighting about just the name.
Well, it works now. It works. It's probably something that is just second nature to say.
It is now. When you think back, I don't think about that time too much, but it was kind of tumultuous.
But there is something to be said with names, and it comes up in everything, even when you're trying to figure out what to call your products. And your newest one, I think probably came pretty straightforward, and that's the Red, White, and Blue Bourbon, which has the heirloom varieties. I'm guessing that wasn't too hard to come up with that name, was it?
No,
No, that one was easy.
that one was cool.
Yeah.
We actually opened to the public on Veterans Day in 2016, which is November 11th. And at the time, we didn't realize that November 11th was always Veterans Day, that it stayed on that day. But we think it's actually beautiful now that, honoring our veterans is something that is a core value for us. So for our first anniversary, we've been growing the red corn, and my husband had developed a blue heirloom corn that he grew that year. So I sourced some white heirloom corn, which we are now growing ourselves also. But I sourced some white heirloom corn. So I did a red corn, white corn, blue corn mash bill. And so we just call it red, white, blue. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Well, and I was going to say, I mean, that is something that you guys have. It's out now, and it's cool too, because you also give a portion of the proceeds back to the Veterans Club of Kentucky.
Yes. So this first batch, portion of our proceeds will go back to the Veterans Club of Kentucky. And the idea is we only release it once a year on Veterans Day. So batch 2 will be released November 11th of 2023. And every year with a different batch number, we will switch up the organization that we donate to, so that we can hopefully spread the love around.
And how important was it to kind of give back? Because you mentioned you launched on Veterans Day, you're able to kind of do the red, white, and blue, and finally now it's come to age where you can release it. But how important is it to kind of give back as well?
It's very important. I mean, for the red, white, and blue, that was always the intention when we first started it. Even as we came up with the mash bill, the idea was that from the beginning, a portion of the proceeds of that bottle were going to go to help our veterans, help our active duty military, help anyone that really needed it that were a veteran in the military. So that was very important to us and has always been part of the plan. I mean, even so far as the barrels, when we would have them set up, if we had veterans or active duty military come through on the tour, they would be able to sign the barrel that we had out for them. And then people got really excited about that and would take pictures of their barrel. And when it came time to release, people really wanted to know if their barrel was part of the batch. So we had to come up with a system for people to be able to find out what barrels were in which batch. And so we added a QR code to the label. We've got a sheet on our website that we update with each batch now. So it's always been important for us to be upfront with people about it.
I love that. I love that. And that's not the only product you guys have out. You kind of have a core 3 that are on shelves. The others being, I've got a couple little samples here by me. That's the straight 4-grain bourbon, and then the bottled and bond rye heavy bourbon.
Correct.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about those?
So the 2 that she's got both the rye and the 4-grain in her hands right now. The 4-grain was the very first bourbon that we ever released that we made all ourselves under our own label. So that was super exciting. We released it in May of 2019. At that time, it was a minimum of 2 years old, and starting by the end of this year, it will all be a minimum of 4 years old. So going forward, all bourbon products that we put out will be at least 4 years old.
That's awesome.
And the 4-grain mash bill actually came up because when we first were coming up with the distillery, the idea was that we would only have one bourbon mash bill that we would make. But in true Nethery fashion, we couldn't agree on what mash bill everybody liked. I liked the rye mash bill, Mom liked the wheat mash bill, Hunter actually liked a mix of the mash bills. So we came up with the 3 mash bills. We went in for trying to find one mash bill and we settled on 3. So we've got the 4-grain mash bill, which was a mix of the rye and the wheat that we originally kind of envisioned, the rye mash bill that I and my dad really liked, and then the wheat mash bill that is Joyce really likes, that is still currently aging. That will be released in April of 2025. So the 4-grain mash bill is 70% Bloody Butcher corn, 15% malted rye, 10% malted wheat, 5% malted barley, 98 proof, currently aged for a minimum of 2 years. But in fact, the batch that is out on the shelf right now is 3.5 years old. And by the end of this year, minimum 4 years old, change the label to reflect that. And then going forward, it will always be a minimum of 4.
4 years old now.
And
This is
then
beautiful.
for the rye bourbon, we released that in November of 2021. It is our first bottle and bond product that we've ever released, which is really exciting. And that mash bill is 75% Bloody Butcher corn, 20% malted rye, 5% malted barley, and then 100 proof, aged for a minimum of 4 years, all in the same season, all the same things that you have to have each bottle and bond.
For beautifulness.
Well, I was gonna say it's really cool to kind of see that, because that also lets folks they have different taste buds, which clearly I think the family does. And I know when we do
Yes.
our reviews, my friend and I, we have different taste buds, and that's kind of the beauty. They get to try something different and maybe find what they love. And if say bourbon's not their thing, you guys also do a few other things that folks might be able to try there as well.
Correct.
Absolutely.
We make vodka, which is 100% Bloody Butcher corn. We make it from scratch ourselves here at the distillery, which is a little bit more complicated than you would think it would be. But we make that here. We've also got some flavored vodkas. So we've got our blueberry flavor, honey flavor, hot pepper, which has been gangbusters. That was a very popular flavor. And then we've also got our coffee vodka. And then we've got our moonshine, which is the 4-grain bourbon mash bill distilled off of our pot still. So like our bourbons are distilled off of the column still, the moonshine is distilled off of our pot still. So a little bit different, slightly different distilling techniques for those, even though they use the same mash bill. And the moonshines, we've got the original moonshine, which is 80 proof. And then we've got our flavored moonshines, which are all 60 proof. And they've also got a little bit of added sugar, whereas the flavored vodkas have no added sugar to them. So anybody who watches their sugar, like I've had some people with some diabetes come through and ask, like, can I drink the moonshine? Like, it's got a lot of sugar in it. I would maybe avoid it, maybe go with the flavored vodkas instead. But the flavored moonshines, we've got apple pie, which my tour guides like to joke that if you make moonshine in the state or in the United States, you legally have to make an apple pie, because it seems like everybody does. That's not true, but it's kind of feels like it's true. We've also got a blackberry, a lemonade, and a cinnamon flavor.
And Autumn, when you're doing all these different things, what's it like for you to kind of go between a bourbon and then go over to the pot still making moonshine and a vodka? Because as folks may or may not know, bourbon takes time to age, so you kind of also got to fill in the gaps and be able to have products that can come to the market a little quicker. So what's it like doing all those different spirits?
At first, we really had to focus on the moonshine and the vodka from a sales point, because everybody wanted the bourbon, but we wanted to do it right. So it just meant aging it and waiting for it. And we didn't do any contract distilling with anybody to have it made ahead of time. So we only started distilling our bourbon in October of 2016, and we opened to the public in November of 2016. So what I had on the shelf was vodka and moonshine, and I didn't have all of the flavors that I've got now. We started out with only 4 products. We started out with the original vodka, and I think it was the honey vodka, and then the original moonshine, and it was the lemonade moonshine.
Yeah.
And those were the 4 that we started with. And then we added in the other flavors as we continued on. So it was funny being able to start distilling the bourbon and then watching it as it aged and being able to taste it at the different points. At this point, you can start to pick up like, okay, this flavor component that we really like in the bourbon that we want to make sure going forward is in there only starts showing up when it's about 3 years old. So if it's released before 3, you're not going to have that flavor component we really want. But then it might shine in the vodka. Like the vodka, when you distill it, comes off with this beautiful cake batter flavor. But like the marzipan flavors in the bourbon don't show up until it's about 2.5, 3 years old. So it's fun being able to see those kind of differences. And they do require different sales techniques. And also when you're just tasting through, we've ended up coming up with a tasting order as we taste through vodka, moonshine, and the bourbon, so that people's palates don't get blown out with a specific flavor.
Now, Joyce, that means a lot more work for you as you do a whole bunch of different things and make everything come to life.
It is a challenge with all those different flavors, and we do it all naturally to try to have a consistent flavor profile over time. Because if you're trying to make the hot pepper vodka in, like right now, January, we use 3 different hot peppers and garlic in that. Well, those peppers aren't necessarily the same flavor naturally in January as they are in June. So trying to get that flavor profile consistent is quite a challenge. So to do that over all those different products, it's quite an ordeal. But we do it with a lot of love, and it means you get to taste those products as they're being processed, because you got to make sure that flavor profile is consistent once it gets in the bottle and goes out the door. Bourbon is beautiful to get to watch it grow and mature in the barrels, to get to taste and see how that's gone as it's gone along from 0 age to 4 and more now. It's really a beautiful thing for me to have aged product, to get to see it come to its maturity and to get to see it continue to mature. It's quite a joy.
Well, and because I mean, like you said, it takes time for these things to hit their kind of sweet spot, and that's always difficult to be willing to let it go that long, because there's a lot of money and time invested in that. But it's got to be rewarding when it does hit the flavor profile you're hoping for.
Oh, it is. I am so happy and so tickled with what we have in our bourbon bottles right now, and our other vodka and moonshine products. And just to throw it out there, we've got a lot of different things going on here at the distillery that we've distilled. We have a gin that we're working on right now. We have some single malt that's laid down. We have some whiskeys that are laid down. We have a lot of different things that we've done and experimented with. So there's going to be some really cool things coming out for us in the future too. In addition to the wheat bourbon that Autumn talked about, that we are continuing to let age and mature a little bit more. Beginning to watch this bourbon mature, I am so happy and so proud of it. And I think the red, white, and blue just really exemplifies what we're trying to do and to show with the Bloody Butcher corn, the heirloom corns, like all a mix of heirloom corns, just pull that all together and to have a beautiful product out on the shelf.
Well, and like you said, folks are able to come by, swing by, try it. If you're driving on I-64, I don't think you can miss them. Or at least if you are, maybe you're focusing very well on the road,
Yes,
which is a good thing. Which is a good thing. But when folks do get to come out and visit the distillery, what can they expect?
So when they come to the distillery, we're open Thursday through Sunday. They can come in. We've got a free spirit tasting on the hour that they can either book ahead of time, or if there's room, we take walk-ins for that. You'll be able to try our bourbons and our original moonshine. We've also got our craft bourbon bar over here at the distillery, where we make cocktails. We've got our vodka flight, our moonshine flight, our aged spirit sampler flight. We've got slushies. We've got barrel aged cocktails. We got all kinds of fun stuff behind that bar that are really good. And then we've also got our barrel tasting experience, which that one you have to book ahead of time on our website. But we'll take you back to the barrel barn and we'll tell you about the history of the property, the history of the distillery. We'll go really in depth with the family and the products that you're tasting. And we'll actually get to try a single barrel bourbon straight from the barrel. We'll literally thief it out of the barrel right in front of you. And you get to try cast strength single barrel product. So those are some of the fun things. And we've also got a mixology class that we've added in. And we're adding in some more fun experiences for the second half of 2023. So there's all kinds of fun stuff.
And while you're here, we have a Creed Cafe, so you get lunch, get a beautiful snacks while you're here too.
Yeah.
Well, and you need that so you can enjoy maybe a couple more beverages there as well. And you both have touched on this as we kind of wrap up, that you have a lot of cool things coming. You've got a lot of things, and that's what people may not understand. Like I said, time takes is the most important thing in the game, and it's fun to kind of watch and see. So, what can you tell us that you have coming up that won't get you in trouble, but that you can give us a nice tease on?
Well, we have a line called our Bloody Butcher's Creed line, which we plan on having releases twice a year in that one. And in that line right now, we have a 90% corn mash bill bourbon that is out right now. And that is 90% Bloody Butcher corn, then malted wheat and malted rye, because in our Jeptha Creed product, all of those small grains are malted. So a little bit of extra earthiness in that flavor profile. And that is a beautiful product that we have out right now. We have some other releases coming in that Bloody Butcher's Creed line, such as a tequila finished bourbon. We have a wheated whiskey that can be coming out. And the blue corn I mentioned, we have some, I call it Bruce's Blue. My husband's name is Bruce. So Bruce's Blue bourbon. That'll be coming out in the next year or two. So several beautiful things coming out in the future.
Yeah,
In addition to the weeded.
she's got it hidden behind her, but there's an entire list of our experimental bourbons with timelines of things that we've got aging right now that will be coming out in that experimental line. And those are one-offs. Once they're released and put out on the shelf, that's it. So once they're gone kind of thing. But yeah, we've got some fun stuff coming down the pipeline.
I'd love to hear that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what y'all can do next. And like I said, check them out there in Shelbyville. You can't miss them right off the interstate there. And Joyce, Autumn, thank you for sharing your story and just having some fun with me.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Find more from Hops and Spirits at hopspirits.com.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.